How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to VoroMotors. I'm AJ Hart, here today with another guide to maintain your ride. Now for today's video, I'm going to be going over how to replace the tires for the EMOVE Cruiser. Now these tires are no joke. They're tough, they're rugged, they're thick as hell. So, they're really tough to replace actually. This is because they're tubeless tires, which you'll see once we pop one of these bad boys off. It's not the easiest job in the world, but it's also not the end of the world. There are a couple tools that I do recommend you pick up for yourself though. The first is a tire shield. We used one and actually cut it in half because it was too big for the tires that we were using, but having one kept the tires safe. Because if you don't have one, you can end up doing some damage and denting the metal around the tire. And the other tool that you're going to want to pick up is tire spoons. You're going to want 2 of them. It makes this job way easier to have something to use to get in there and pry the tire over the lips. Again, you'll see that in action here in a little bit. And both of these tools are going to be in the description down below. Once you have those 2 tools and the other tools that are used for general maintenance on the Cruiser, you should be good to go. We're going to go ahead and do the video today on the rear wheel and the front wheel. That way you get both in one guide in case you want to replace both of them, or this way you can just come back and check this video out at a later time when you want to replace the other. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Now, as always, the very first thing that we need to do to get to the back wheel is remove this brake. There's going to be 2 screws on here that you need to remove. One is at the bottom of the brake unit, and the other is at the top of the brake unit. Just screw both of those bad boys out, and the brake can come off no problem. Be mindful that when you remove these, there's a little bit of Loctite, so it could be tough to really break the seal on them. Next, we're going to go ahead and remove the 4 screws on the top of the fender. These are all going to be done with a little Allen wrench, so just grab one, start twisting these bad boys right off. There's going to be 4 screws on this fender for you to remove. Once all 4 of those are loose, you can go ahead and raise the fender up and twist it over to the right. We just need to get this out of the way. Now that there's nothing above it, we can also take the brake unit off. Now we're just looking at an exposed wheel. Now we're going to take a wrench and we're going to go ahead and loosen up the nut on each side of the wheel. There's going to be one on the left and one on the right. We're also going to see this little lock pin. We're going to go ahead and take that off of the wheel as well. And we're going to go ahead and do that same thing on the right side as well. Remove the nut and then grab this little locking pin. Now you can knock the wheel right on down. Now on the inside you're going to notice that there are another pair of little washers, so we're going to go ahead and take those off as well. All in total, in order to get this wheel off, you should notice 6 pieces that you removed. 2 washers, 2 locking pins, and 2 nuts. Now our technician is going to go ahead and pull at the cable at the base of the scooter a little bit to try to get a little bit of wiggle room. Now in order to replace this tire, we need to make sure it's deflated. So our technician went ahead and took the cap off of the valve and took something small to push at the center pin to release all of the air in the tire. He's going to go ahead and squeeze out as much as he can on the sides to make sure that all the air is out. Now before we can move on, we're going to go ahead and make sure that we take the brake disc off of this tire as well. This part isn't necessarily mandatory, but it is a good idea to make sure that you don't end up breaking anything you don't want to break. There's going to be 6 screws on the brake disc that you can remove and take off. Once all 6 of those screws are free, you can just take that brake disc right off. Now here comes the hard part. In order to actually do the job, we're going to take a clamp and one of those shields that we mentioned, and put the shield and the clamp on the bottom of the wheel, and use the clamp to actually squeeze from the top. Our technician is going to make sure that we're squeezing the tire and not any of the metal parts. Again, we need to be very careful not to break the inner part of this wheel. Now we're going to take that spoon and wedge that spoon in between the tire shield and the tire itself, and leverage that and heave it up and over the lip. It's going to take a couple of tries and a bit of kind of wiggling around to get it, but once you get it to pop over the lip, you're going to kind of want to inch it around the tire as much as possible until you can pop it right off. like that. Now in order to get the tire completely off, what you're going to also want to do is take the spoon and just kind of slide it through the tire and the wheel and just kind of leverage it to pop it off. Again, kind of inching around it to pop it over as much as you can. Now this is where things get a little bit tricky and silly. You want to make sure that you pop the wheel off of the tire itself, off towards the right of the wheel. Because if you get hooked up on the line, you're not going to be able to push it through to the other side. And it's going to be stuck like we have ours. So we're going to go ahead and put it all back together and give you the example one more time. Now like I mentioned, we did that completely wrong because we popped the tire actually up towards the scooter and it ended up kind of trapping that tire there. So we're going to take this job from the beginning and go through it one more time. We start by squeezing the clamp down around the whole tire so that we can get a little bit of wiggle room to get our spoon in there. Once our spoon is in there, we can put it between the tire and the wheel and leverage the tire off of the wheel itself. Again, we're going to make sure that we're having all of our leverage against the shield to make sure that we don't break anything. Now that the tire's popped halfway off, we're going to go ahead and grab that spoon and inch it around to make sure that we pop the second piece of the tire over the lip completely. This time we're going to make sure that we're popping it up and over towards the side that does not have the cable connecting the scooter all the way through. Again, we want to make sure that we get that tire free, not being trapped between the motor and the scooter. Now our technician had a little bit of more difficulty with it this time, but we did manage to pop it off. Now really quick, now that this job is done, I want to go ahead and show you the wheel and the tire now that they're separate. Again, you want to make sure that you didn't damage any part of the wheel. If you damage or nick any of this, you could end up busting the seal because again, this is a tubeless tire. The seal between that metal and the tire is what keeps it solid and keeps the air in. So if you cracked or bust that metal, you're going to run into some serious issues. Now here comes the more difficult part. The goal for getting it back on is to inch 2 points of the tire back under the wheel lip at the same time. So what we ended up doing was we positioned one part of the tire under the lip and then used 2 spoons to sort of pull that wheel towards our technician and bring those lips underneath. We ended up doing it once on one side, but it popped off the other side completely, so we needed to do it one more time. By pulling the tire down towards the technician, we're setting the lip at 2 positions at once. And there we go, popped in. Now we're good to start putting this wheel all back together. We're going to start with that disc brake. Make sure that you put it all the way back together, all 6 of those screws. Once the disc for the disc brake is put back together, we're going to go ahead and put the wheel back up into its spot where it was sitting. Don't forget to put those washers on the inside, and then you can just lift it up into the position it's supposed to be. Put those locking pins on each side so that it stays put a little bit. And then we can go ahead and put the nuts down on each side. Once those nuts are on the threads, we're going to go ahead and tighten those down nice and tight. Next, we're going to try to feed as much of that cable back into the scooter as we can. We don't want that cable dangling too much. Now we're going to go ahead and put that brake and that fender back together. The brake is really simple, it's those same 2 screws that we took off earlier. One on the top and one on the bottom. And the fender is the same way, just those 4 screws that we removed in the beginning of the job. Real nice and easy to fix. Now for the moment to test it. Go ahead and take an air pump and try to fill up the tire. Ideally, you're not going to hear any whistling or hissing or anything, and it'll be totally fine and you won't have damaged anything, and your back tire is completely replaced. Now doing this on the front tire is just as, if not a little bit, easier. We're going to go ahead and remove the brake by loosening those top and bottom screws again. And then we're going to go ahead and take a wrench and loosen these two nuts on the side. Once those two nuts are loose, you're going to notice that they come off to reveal a rod through the center. Go ahead and take something like a pin or a long rod and try to knock that center rod that's already there out to the other side. Once that's been knocked all the way through, you can go ahead and take that out and pull the wheel straight down. When you pull it down, you're going to notice two little washers off to the side. Make sure that you don't lose those. We're going to need to put those back onto the wheel to put it all back together. Now you can go ahead and just bring it straight down. The brake unit may catch a little bit, but it should be able to pop right off. Now that it's free, we're going to go ahead and remove that disc brake again. We just want to make sure that that's not in the way when we start using our clamp. It's the same system as with the back wheel. There's going to be those 6 screws that we want to remove to free the disc brake. Now to get this tire off of the wheel, we're going to be doing it the exact same way. We're going to take that clamp and put the shield on the bottom and then start clamping down on the top. Again, we're going to make sure that the piece of the clamp that is on the wheel is only on the wheel and not on any of the metal pieces. Then we're going to take that tire shield and put it on the lip, and we're going to take a tire spoon and inch that tire up and over the lip of the wheel. And we're just going to try to peel it up around the whole thing. And this is where a second tire spoon can come in handy, because sometimes you maybe only will get it a little bit and you'll need a second tool to really give you the leverage you need to wrap it around the tire. Our technician actually dropped a rod through the center of the tire so that he had something to use as leverage to twist the spoon around. I thought that this was a pretty next level tactic, and if you're running into difficulties, you might be able to try that. Now we can go ahead and pull the wheel right out from the tire. And there we go, we're ready to go. Now putting it back in is again pretty easy. Just push it together. Now our technician's not going to be using the tire shield here, which isn't maybe the smartest move, but he is a trained professional, so we're going to let him do it. You're going to put the tire centered up and lipped correctly on the wheel on one spot, and then you're going to use these two spoons to inch it down and around the rest of the wheel. And there we go. All done and in. Now we're ready to start putting this one all back together. It'll be the exact same system that we used to put it all apart. We're going to put those 6 screws back onto the disc brake and tighten those down. And then we're going to take those washers, the small washer on the side with the disc brake and the large washer on the opposite side, and lift those up in between the forks of the front wheel. Then we're going to try to put that rod back through the center all the way to make sure that it shows on both sides. Now this may take a little bit of finagling and wiggling to make sure that it comes through all the way. Our technician is having a little bit of issue. He's inched it a little bit of the way, and now he's going to go ahead and try to put the washer in now that he's pushed the rod up to the wheel. Now he's going to go ahead and inch that washer where it needs to sit. Now you can take a hammer and bang it through the rest of the way. Just a couple little love taps to make sure that we don't break anything. Now that it's sitting through and we can see it on both sides, we're going to go ahead and take those two nuts and tighten it down on each side. Try to tighten them down at the same pace because we don't want one side to thread more than the other. We could run into some issues there. Now we're going to go ahead and put that brake unit back up on the top. Now since we're over here, we're going to go ahead and rest that brake unit where it needs to be before we go down and tighten those nuts. Once those nuts are tightened, we're going to go ahead and go back to that brake unit and tighten that brake unit all the way down. And once this brake unit is tightened down, you may find that you need to tune the brakes, but the job should be completely done. Go ahead and put some air into it just to make sure that it holds air and you didn't damage anything. Good to go. And there we have it, the job's done. Now this is a longer video, I'm sure you noticed. We went ahead and did it on both the front and the rear tire. It's a lot easier to do on the front tire because there's less stuff involved, but the back tire is probably going to be the one that wears out faster, just because we all know that you're out there doing sick burnouts with this thing. With that being said, that brings us to a close on this video. If you have any questions or concerns that came up during this video, go ahead and drop those in the comments down below. If you have any ideas for other videos you'd like to see us do, go ahead and drop those into the comments down below as well. I've been AJ Hart. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope that this video helps, and I hope you enjoy your ride.